Hello, dear. It's Heather, and you're watching Save Today with Heather J. I'm somebody who has spent her entire adult life living paycheck to paycheck and being one life event away from financial crisis. In order to change that, I've created this channel. I've chosen to share my journey with you. And my channel's a little bit different than some of the others in that I have chosen to bring my craft and my art and my joy into my channel, as well as just the budgeting. If it were just the budgeting, I find it would be very hard to stay motivated and to continue. And I need to be motivated and I need to continue. If that sounds like something you might be interested in following this journey, I do invite you to subscribe and follow and see where this is going to lead. For those of you who aren't interested in the art/craft portion, I'm only doing that at the end of my channel, at the end of my videos, so that you aren't forced to watch it if you don't want to. Of course, you can click off at any time because nobody's forced to do anything. Anyway, that's a long ramble. I just want to get straight into today's video. Today, what we're going over is my month of June closeout. We're going to see how I did with what I estimated versus what happened. Now, June was very difficult for me to budget from the very beginning. To start with, it was a 3-paycheck month, which on the one hand sounds very exciting to have a little bit of extra money. And on the other hand, because I'm so new to this, it's quite literally my second month trying to do this, I don't yet know what normal is or looks like or should be. And so I didn't have any kind of normal routine to have to, it was just challenging. Added to that is the fact that I was really hoping to get my U-Haul storage boxes shipped to me in the month of June. It was my hope that having that extra paycheck would allow me that extra $1,000 to add to my tax money and get that. Now, at the time I set up my budget, I did not yet have my taxes in hand, but I did have my totals for what I was going to receive. And for those of you who may not have followed along and aren't aware of what that was, I have moved a lot. And in the last I did not file this year's taxes and the previous year's taxes. So I had 2 years' taxes to file. So that's 2 federal taxes. And in that time, I had lived in 3 separate states. So last year, I had federal and 2 states. The year before that, I had federal and 3 states. So obviously, number one, filing those taxes was incredibly challenging. And so that's why the 1 year didn't get done. So I had a lot of income I thought might be coming in from a lot of different areas. And one of those tax returns from one state had the potential to have some funding from COVID related payments on it for $1,400. I think that was the federal actually, in addition to what I was going to be getting federally. And I did not know if I had already received that $1,400 or not. I really had my fingers crossed. Turns out I didn't get that $1,400, so that was cut off. So anyway, when I started my budget, I had an estimate of what was going to be coming in, but I didn't have those taxes actually in hand. I had filed them in April, at the end of April, beginning of May. And I really hoped and expected it would be in my hand by the middle of June. It's not what happened. So I did not include those taxes in this budget setup because I didn't know for certain where they were going to come. And I did not include the shipping of my boxes in this budget because, again, I didn't know where it was going to come. But in my head, I knew if I got it, these things were going to happen. If I did not, these things were going to happen. So that was very difficult to budget around. And then as we got into the middle of the month, other things came up that were financial setbacks, those life events I talk about, that I did not know were coming, did not have any expectation of, and had a huge impact on things that were happening peripherally around what's happening here in my budget. And that had an impact throughout the month on the way things went. And if you've watched my last couple of videos, you'll kind of already know what things I'm referencing. So I'm not going to really go over a lot of that again. Just know that from the get-go, this budget was hard to do. Every single check-in I had to do was very hard to do. And I spent hours going over my budget, kind of behind the scenes, working things in my head, and so many headaches. There's a train going by. I'm sorry, you guys. I live right next to a freight line and I can't stop those. And I apologize because I know it's very irritating to hear that in the background. I can't stop that. So let's get into what I estimated. For me, June was a 3 paycheck month, and that's based on which paycheck the 1st of June fell in and which paycheck the 1st of July fell in. And so it's 3 paychecks for me. I estimate my checks based on, I am an hourly employee, not salary, so I get paid $20 an hour. I work full-time, which is 32 to 40 hours. It's considered full-time. I write my budget at 38 hours a week. That has been fairly consistent, and if that changes, my estimate will change. And I take 25% out for tax estimate. And so in that way, I just a little bit underestimate my hours and just a little bit overestimate my taxes, so that I will always be just a little bit estimating a little bit more. It'll be a little bit extra at the end. I really want to make sure that I don't estimate a certain amount and then actually receive a couple $100 less. That would be very hard to readjust from. But you know, those things are going to happen in life. That's life. So for this month, 3 paychecks, the estimate was $3,420. What I actually received throughout the month was $3,710.83, which was over my estimate by $290.83. So that's good. Roughly $100 a month, or $100 a paycheck over. The next category I go over here is my fixed expenses. Now I had rent was $853. My rent is $850. I have it set up on auto pay to come out on the 1st, which is a $3 service fee. So that is exactly what it was. My utilities were $233.35. Now my utilities at this time get billed to the landlord, and then I pay the landlord. And so that I have to pay a $20 service fee to the landlord for that. And then I have to pay $1.75 for the money order that I get from the post office. And so that's what that $233.35 is. And that's exactly what I got paid. Now the way I'm doing this at this time is I receive a bill and then it gets added into my next budget. But typically, by the time it comes around to pay that bill, I've already received the next bill. And so I think in July, I'm going to take what I already have and create an estimate for what might be coming and see if I can't get a little bit ahead on that and stop working so far behind. I don't know if that will work out in July or if that will come in August. I've mentioned before, and again, for those of you who haven't watched that, I'm new to this state, and because I'm new to the state, I have never been a customer of this particular utility company, and when they have no history on you, they want a deposit. And so this company wants a $350 deposit on my account. So how that works is you pay the $350, they hang on to that, and then they switch the bill over into your name. And then if you've been good on your payments for the entire year, you then get that $350 back. And each utility company does it differently. A year is pretty standard, but some it's 18 months or 2 years. And so then at some point, I would get that back or get that credited onto my account once I've proven that I'm a reliable customer. But they keep that deposit in case you get behind and they need to turn you off. They still have money that they can pay those utilities with. I don't have $350 in my budget yet. I'm working hard to find where I can get that from, but at this point in time, it's just not there yet. So I have to pay the service fee. Now that can't go on forever. It's already gone on for far too long, so that will have to change, but that's where that is. Then my phone is $236.51, and unfortunately, that did not get paid this month. I made payment arrangements to push that into July, and those arrangements are set up to be automatically withdrawn at very specific dates within July, and it's being paid. It just didn't get paid out of this income. And again, some of my money had to be reprioritized to deal with some life events that came up, and so some of that money had to deviate out of my budget and will come back in the end of July. It is what it is. It's what I had to do, and as somebody who lives very low income, I'm sure I'm not the only person who has ever had to do that. And the fact is, in the past, I didn't go and create a payment plan when I knew that happened. In the past, I just didn't pay it. I just didn't say anything. And then when it got turned off, I then dealt with it in kind of an emergency type situation. And so I'm unhappy that I had to do that, but I'm proud that I've grown enough to plan for that and to not, just to be a grown-up about it. Anyway, my U-Haul boxes, all of my products, all of my possessions are in storage boxes in another state on the other side of the country. I have 3 storage boxes. Those are $97.99 a month per box. And I pay for one on the 16th and 2 on the 28th. Now, because this was a 3 paycheck month, that meant that the 28th of May fell within this budget and the 28th of June fell within this budget. So while it's 3 a month, it was actually 5 payments that I needed to make within this month. So that's what that $489.95 is, and that is what got paid. I did have a credit card I was paying off. It was my last credit card. It was my last payment I needed to pay off. It was $126.64. That is what got paid. There was no difference there. If you've watched some of my other videos, you will know that one of the credit cards, my first credit card, the one I thought was paid off months and months and months ago, has not been paid off. And that will be showing up starting in July as I pay what I thought was already paid off again. So unfortunately, this credit card bill stays in my budget. Well, a category for credit card stays in my budget, but it's a different one being paid off. I did have this subscription that was $10.82. That is exactly what came out. And I had this Best Buy. This was a yearly renewal for virus protection on my phone. I got the email. It said it was going to be $5. With taxes, it was actually $5.42. So that was a little bit more than I had estimated in my budget. Those two, my not paying the phone bill and the Best Buy being a little bit extra, meant I kept $236.09 out of into my budget in extra cash. The next category I go over is my flexible spending. And in my flexible spending, I check my groceries, my dining out, my transportation, my art, and my miscellaneous. Those are the things that have a tendency to fluctuate from week to week, month to month. And part of those fluctuations are just based on my needs at the time. Part of those fluctuations are based on where I purchase from at the time. And these are the things that, when things get tight, get cut the most. These are things I just have more flexibility in. That's my flexible income. So my groceries, I had estimated $110 a week for a total of $660 during this month. I ended up spending $654.31, which was just $5.69 less than I had estimated. So that's good. I think if things had not been as tight as they were, I would have gone over fairly significantly in this budget. So once the purse strings loosen up, I do need to give myself more than $110 a week. It's just not quite enough to have me feel comfortable with the amount of groceries I have in here. It gets a little bit scary at the end of the pay period. I don't like it. I have to give myself more. In my dining out, I had given myself an estimate of $25 a week for $150 in this 6-week pay period. I did end up spending $175.49, which was $25.49 over budget. And because things were so tight at the end of the month, I spent that $175 in the first 3 weeks, or the first 3.5 weeks maybe. And so I have either, or a combination of, underestimated how much I need in this and gone out to eat too much. So again, as things loosen up a little bit as we get out of July and into August, I may end up needing to give myself more in this estimate. But I also need to continue to work on changing that behavior. This is the area that I want to change the most. In my transportation, I had estimated that I would be filling my tank up 4 times in this 6 weeks. And then of course I do take the bus to work on the days I work Monday through Friday when the weather is well enough. So for this 6 weeks, I did end up spending $161.73, which was just $1.73 more than I had estimated I would. And that's actually great. When I estimated only 4, I thought I might be cutting myself a little bit close, that perhaps a 5th payment was going to be what happened, and thankfully it did not. So that worked out well. And then in my art, June was the first month I decided to create a separate category for my art. It became very clear in May that that was necessary for me. That's too important to myself and my mental health, my joy. It counterbalances the negativity and the frustrations I feel when things like this are happening, and it's too important. I gave myself an estimate of $10 a week for a total of $60 for the month, but I actually only went on one day. I made 2 transactions for a total of $18.88 in relation to this particular project. And so I did save myself $41.12. That was just extra that this project didn't need, which between May and June has shown me that for my art, I can't just pick a random number and have that be my consistent amount the way I can perhaps with my groceries and dining out. This, from month to month and project to project, needs to have some ebb and flow, some bigger budgets on some months and smaller budgets on other months, just based on the project at hand. And then my miscellaneous for me is just kind of those things that show up unexpectedly, or things that I'm making a special trip to purchase that aren't kind of my normal everyday necessary items. And I had estimated $10 a week for a total of $60 a month. And that was a gross underestimation because I actually spent $130.05, going over by $70.05. So this is probably about 2/3 things I was unaware of and had no choice but to do, and about 1/3 my own choice. So this could have been a little bit less. But I'll have to kind of evaluate that, watch that a little bit more and see what happens come July and August, and see, was this 130 just a fluke, Or is that something I'm going to need to really continue on? In fact, let's go check back in May and see. May, I spent $118.91 in May in miscellaneous, and that actually included miscellaneous and art at that point in time. So 48, 18. I spent about an additional $30 between these two categories, more than I had spent in May. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I had estimated I would be spending $1,090 in my flexible spending, which sounded huge. $1,000? That's crazy. But I ended up spending $1,140.46. So I spent more, and I was really very tight most of the time in here. So this estimation is not really accurate. I definitely have more spending that I'm doing in here. And if I had not been tracking this for you guys, I would not be aware of that. And I probably would have spent $1,500 and $1,600 here just arbitrarily spending and not paying any attention. So I'm grateful for this channel and for you guys and for the need to check in, because it definitely helped to keep me on safer ground than I would have otherwise been. So for my flexible spending, I was over budget by $50.46 here. So when we carry down all of those totals, I am left with, I thought I would have $374.73 left. I actually had $849.19 left in this pay period, which was $476.46 more than I thought I was going to have. Now this $849, I know some of you are seeing this $849 and we're like, well, you really needed to go pay that. This, like I said, this money had to go deal with something else that came up unexpectedly and will be coming back to me again, probably towards the middle or end of July, as it goes to pay for, I have a car repair, I have those U-Haul, and I have surgery. Those things had to kind of step away and come back in, step away and come back in. My goal in this channel for myself is to eventually have savings set up so that when those one-off events happen, I can pull that from the savings, because that's what it's there for, and not have it impact what's happening in here. Still be able to make full payments on all of my bills, still be able to make full groceries without having to cut so severely at the end the way I did here. But I'm not there yet. That at this point looks like a fantasy, you know. It will come, because I'm determined to get there. I've watched enough other YouTube channels to know that when you do this, when you stick to it, it really does happen. But I don't see that light at the end of the tunnel right now. I am very much deep within the tunnel, just kind of searching and feeling my way around. So that is where we're at. Once we finish out June, I'm so glad to finally be done with this headaches. What I will tell you is that I now have in hand all of my taxes, except for one. And that one is just like $60. And so if I don't receive that in time for my estimated delivery in July, that's fine. $60 isn't going to stop me from having my U-Haul stuff show up. So Lord willing, I'm getting my stuff in July, and I already have tentative dates set on that, again, based on the exit and entrance of this 849. So, and this actually is I have $970 that was able to go out, and so some of that is carryover from when I finished out May, my last paycheck in May. Let's see, May paycheck number 2. I did have $191.77 left in this check that carried over and covered some of what was happening here. So those two combined gave me that $970. Initially it was going to be $1,000, but that last $30 never made it over to this other stuff, so it'll come back to me anyway. we're done with June. We get to start July. Um, things are still going to be incredibly tight in July, but that's pretty much the end of it. We did majority of it in June, and the rest of it's going to happen in July. And that is the end of the budgeting portion of this video. I thank you again for coming along with me on this journey. It's been quite the challenge for me. Again, I do my budget and then I do my craft. And at this point, this month's craft is done. In May, I had gotten it done just at the very last video. And if this had been a 4-week month for me, this one probably would have been done just barely at the last 4 weeks. But because this had a little bit of extra time, this is done a little bit ahead of June, but not in enough time for me to start a second project for June. And I have a very specific project I want to be working on in July. And again, my own personal thing, because obviously I'm just making this up as I go, but I wanted to have one project per month and not have each week change. I want my background to be consistent. I want to be able to look through the thumbnails of my videos and know which month that goes in, and just a little bit of consistency. This month, for those of you who are new, I'm going to say this again for those of you who have been here. I'm sorry for the repetition, but a couple of years ago, my oldest granddaughter and I went to Joann's Fabrics. She picked out a heart-shaped pillow form and 2 fabrics she wanted on it. She wanted one on the front and one on the back. And I don't know, honestly, if she wanted that or if I suggested that at that time. Probably she couldn't make a decision on which of the 2 she liked the most. And I said, well, let's just do both. I did end up picking some pom-pom trim and a zipper. I thought that the pom-pom trim would add a little bit of fun and flair, and would be fun for, you know, a young girl. And the zipper, I wanted to be able to get the pillow form in and out of the cover so that the cover could be washed. In the end, it turns out that zipper was a little bit too short for how full and fluffy that pillow form is. And the cover on the pillow form is very, very thin material that has a tendency to tear as it's being yanked in and out of that very small zipper. So I don't know how effective the zipper is going to be and the washability of the cover is going to be, but that was the plan and that's what's done. And so that's done. And for those of you who don't know, when you go to buy fabric, you have to buy it by increments of a yard, 1 yard, half yard, quarter yard. And it comes in a very set length, and you don't get to change that length, that thickness that it is wrapped up on the bolt. So I asked for a half of yard of both of these fabrics, but I had all that extra that was left on that bolt, you know, from the fold, from the carryover, the depth that that fabric was. And so I turned that into a blanket. I had picked this satin binding. I actually don't like satin binding myself. I don't like that edge on the blankets, but it is a very easy way to finish the edges. And so it's easy to go on. And that's why it's on a lot of the mass manufactured blankets. And it went really well when I was putting that on this blanket. And so this is a 2-sided blanket, just like the pillow itself is 2-sided. Then I had some scraps that were left that were a lot to just throw away. I struggle with the amount of waste and byproduct that comes in the fashion industry and the fabric industry. Having taken classes and seen some behind the scenes stuff that happens in that industry, I just feel, and even before I took those classes, that environmentalist stuff is something that is important to me. The waste in the fast fashion industry has always been something I struggle with. So I wanted to use those scraps that were fairly usable. I have several young granddaughters in my life, And so I decided to turn those scraps into some doll blankets, and those turned out very well. And so that is all done. But why? In my last video, I talked about why it took me 6 weeks to do this project. In this video, I want to talk about why it took me 2 years to do this project. Because that's insane that we went over 2 years ago to the fabric store and I'm just now doing it. And I was able to do it in 5 weeks. You know, in my 6-week schedule, I was able to get that finished. So why, if I could get it done, did it take me 2 years to get it done? So there's a couple of different things that happened. Again, I've addressed a couple of times in this video. I moved a lot in that time frame. That meant that a lot of my things were packed in that time frame. So when I moved from the one state to the next, things stayed packed up, and then it took a while for them to get unpacked and the sewing table to get set up and find all of my supplies. Then they got packed again, unpacked, packed again, unpacked. And there were large periods within that I wasn't sewing because my free time was taken up with other things. Again, schooling being one of them. And so there wasn't a whole lot of extra time. I work full time, go to school. I was going to school full time. And then there's all that homework. So there wasn't a lot of free available time to be doing this. And I'm not somebody who, let's back up. When I started this journey, I started with quilting. And I was somebody who very religiously followed a pattern. I needed to be shown and told how much to cut, what the measurements were, and I followed a pattern. Somebody else had already worked through how it would come together best. And so initially I just followed the pattern, followed the pattern, followed the pattern. Very happy to do so. I had others around me who could just off the top of their head just whip up this thing. And it was just amazing to see their mind work, to have just this blank slate, and 3 hours later they've got a purse or a wallet or whatever, and they have no pattern. They just did it. As I did this longer and longer and got better and better, I began to see things that I would like to change in those patterns. I'd like to adjust. And things were popping up in my head that I didn't have a pattern for, that I wanted to try and do. And I've slowly begun to create my own patterns, create my own projects. And this was one of those. Now, if I had just done a regular square-shaped pillow, would have been fairly easy. I assumed this heart-shaped pillow was going to be fairly easy. It turns out, for a lot of reasons, it was not. Those curves create a lot of change in what that pillow form should look like. In order to wrap up around those curves and meet there in the middle, there is some areas where I have to give extra, and there's some areas where I have to have less. And so getting that shape right was difficult. And then getting the piping in here was challenging. And so every single time I tried to do a step, I would have to undo it and redo it and undo it and redo it. And in some instances, honestly, this pom-pom trim was probably 5 separate attempts to get this right. And if I had been following a pattern, it would have very clearly said in there where and how. And I had to make that mistake over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so at a certain point, I got frustrated and put it to the side and left it there and went on to other things that made me happier. So that was a huge part of it as well. I just left it over there and didn't even look at it. That almost happened at the beginning when I got this out again. I had forgotten all of the lessons from 2 years ago and made the same mistakes and had to stop and start 3 times with this pom-pom trim before I finally got it right. And then when I got it right, the zipper was off. And I went back and forth with the zipper 2 or 3 times and got really frustrated and was like, that's it, I'm done. And thankfully, because I'm here with you guys, I followed through on this project and I got it done to a point where I'm happy. But that is why this project took 2 years. And I have other projects that are going to come up that also have been in the pipeline for several years. In fact, the one I'm doing in July, I think I started in like 2012 or something. So those kinds of things. This is part of my personality, part of why the budgeting doesn't work, part of why a lot of my projects haven't gotten finished. Because at a certain point, I reach a point where it's no longer easy. And it's not just not easy, it has gotten very, very, very difficult. And I'm just like, meh, next. So we're going to work through that. And that's all I have to talk about on this video. Thank you for being here with me. The only video I have now to finish out June is my successes and wins. What went right in June? I have spent a lot of time verbalizing what went wrong. I've spent even more time internalizing what went wrong in June, and have spent some time in a very negative headspace over the challenges I was facing in June. And I need to finish out with a very strong focus on the things that went right. If I don't look at what went right, I don't know about you, I feel like we're probably all of us, a lot of us, in similar situations. But if I spend too much time on the negative, not enough time on the positive, it's easy to forget the positive ever even happened. And it's easy to wallow in the depths of despair about, it's never ever going to get better. So I need to focus on that. That will be my last video for my June budget. And then I will start my July budget. And so hopefully that will happen. I'm hoping that video comes out in May and my July setup starts on Wednesday. I think I just said a whole lot of words wrong. My June wins, I'm hoping, will be Monday. I think I just said May. And my July budget setup for the month will be on Wednesday. So that, I think, is what we're looking at coming down the pipe. Thank you so much for being here today. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please have fun. Bye-bye now.